My name is Courtney Thompson, and at my sister's promotion party, there was a moment when the entire room froze just because one man walked through the door. 2 weeks before the party, a message popped up in the family group chat. My sister Kelsey excitedly announced my husband, a senior executive at a multinational tech corporation, will be attending the party. This is a huge opportunity for my career. Everyone, please behave appropriately, especially you, Courtney. I stared at that message for a very long time. I didn't reply. She had no idea that the name she was so proudly showing off was already pinned right on my monthly work schedule. That night, in the brilliantly lit house in Westchester, Kelsey raised her glass, smiling thinly, her voice dripping with contempt. The whole table nodded along, their eyes sliding over me as if I were merely a shadow, the little sister who doesn't understand anything about business, the one always seated in the corner of the room. Then he appeared. The chatter died instantly. The air felt strangled. His gaze swept across the room, paused on me, then slowly turned toward my sister. No one realized what that look really meant. But from that second onward, everything I had kept silent for so many years began to shift. This wasn't just a party. This was the moment truth was about to crash head-on into arrogance. If you've ever been looked down on by your own family, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is not going to end the way they think it will. To understand why I sat silently in the corner at that party, I need to take you back to the house in New Jersey where my sister and I grew up. It was a typical middle-class suburban home in a quiet neighborhood, 2 stories, a small backyard, and a driveway that always had Dad's old pickup truck parked in it. Dad Thomas Thompson worked as a construction engineer for 30 years before retiring early due to a back injury. Mom, Patricia Thompson, still does part-time at a local bank handling deposits and customer service. They were good parents in the traditional sense. They paid the bills, kept the house clean, and made sure we had food on the table. But when it came to attention, affection, and celebration, there was only ever room for one child, Kelsey. Kelsey was the firstborn, the golden girl. She had the looks, tall, blonde, always smiling, and the personality that drew people in. She was outgoing, quick with a joke, and knew exactly how to charm adults. From the moment she could talk, she was the center of every family gathering. Mom and Dad hung on her every word. When she scraped her knee, it was a crisis. When she won a spelling bee in 3rd grade, they threw a party. I was the quiet second child, the one who read books in the corner, got straight A's without fanfare, and never asked for much. The favoritism started small, but grew impossible to ignore. When Kelsey graduated from community college with an associate's degree in business administration, Mom and Dad bought her a brand new Honda Civic. "Our oldest daughter needs reliable transportation," Dad said proudly, handing her the keys in front of the whole family. I had just been accepted to NYU's Stern on a full-ride scholarship, the kind that covers tuition, room, and board because of my grades and test scores. Dad looked at the acceptance letter, nodded once, and said, "That's nice, Courtney. But don't think going to a fancy school guarantees you'll make more money than your sister someday." Birthdays told the same story. Kelsey's parties were events, rented venues, 30 friends, a big cake with her name, in fondant, expensive gifts like designer bags or jewelry. Mine were quiet dinners at home. Mom would bake a sheet cake, Dad would give me a card with $20 inside, and that was it. No friends invited, no fuss. I learned early that my accomplishments didn't earn celebration. They earned polite acknowledgement at best. The gap widened when Kelsey got married. The wedding was extravagant, a venue in the Hamptons, 200 guests, open bar, live band. Mom and Dad told every relative, every neighbor, our daughter married so well. Brandon is an executive at a big tech company. They beamed with pride, showing off photos for years. When I finished my MBA at NYU, graduating with honors and job offers from consulting firms, Mom's only question was, "So when are you going to find someone stable like your sister? You're not getting any younger, Courtney." Kelsey started at CyberGuard Solutions in a mid-level sales support role. She climbed fast not because of exceptional performance reviews, but because she was dating Brandon, who was already a rising star in operations. Once they married, the promotions came even quicker. Mom and Dad couldn't stop talking about it. Kelsey is really moving up in the world, Dad would say at every family dinner. She knows how to network, how to make connections. Meanwhile, I was building a career in cybersecurity, publishing research on data privacy frameworks, speaking at industry conferences, getting invited to advisory boards. But I stopped mentioning it. Every time I tried, the conversation shifted back to Kelsey's latest raise or new company car. Over the years, I stopped trying to prove anything. I realized that no matter how high I climbed, they would never see it the way they saw Kelsey's success. So I kept my world separate: my apartment in Manhattan, my board seats, my consulting fees. I built a life that didn't depend on their approval. I didn't need their parties or their praise anymore. And then Kelsey announced her promotion to senior director. For the first time, she invited the whole family to celebrate at her house in Westchester. She made it very clear in the group chat Brandon would be there, and everyone needed to look sharp and behave. Especially me. While the family busied themselves with preparations for Kelsey's big celebration, I carried on with my own life, the one they had never truly bothered to understand in any real detail. After graduating from NYU Stern with my MBA, I dove straight into the world of cybersecurity research. My focus was data privacy frameworks and the emerging legal technical intersections of personal information protection. Within 2 years, I had published 3 peer-reviewed papers in top-tier journals, one of which became a foundational reference for GDPR compliance models in enterprise environments. Citations rolled in steadily, colleagues began reaching out for collaboration, and soon I was presenting at Black Hat RSA Conference and smaller but highly specialized privacy symposiums across Europe and Asia. The invitations started arriving more frequently, first as a guest lecturer at NYU, then as an external expert for government task forces on data breach notification protocols. About 5 years ago, the most significant shift happened. I was approached to join the board of directors at CyberGuard Solutions as an independent director. It wasn't through family connections or networking dinners. It came from my published body of work, my testimony before a Senate subcommittee on data security, and recommendations from C-level executives who had read my research. Accepting the role meant quarterly board meetings, strategic oversight of the company's privacy and security roadmap, and a seat at the table where major decisions were made. It remains one of the highest honors an independent cybersecurity expert can achieve. Financially, the picture was equally solid. My part-time faculty position and ongoing research grants at NYU provided a stable base. Board fees combined with selective high-level consulting projects for Fortune 100 clients brought my annual income to roughly $3 million. I owned a 2-bedroom condo in a pre-war building on the Upper West Side, nothing ostentatious but quiet, filled with books and overlooking Riverside Park. My investments were conservative yet diversified: index funds, some real estate trusts, and a small venture allocation in early-stage privacy tech startups. I never once mentioned the numbers to my family. Every time I had tried in the past, even casually, the topic somehow circled back to Kelsey's latest promotion, her new bonus, or the square footage of her Westchester house. As the date of the party approached, the family group chat lit up with reminders and excitement. Then came Kelsey's message, the one that crystallized everything: everyone please dress nicely, it's my house in Westchester, so no casual stuff. And please don't say anything weird or off-topic. Brandon is a very senior executive, super busy. He's only stopping by for a short time. A few minutes later, a private message popped up from her. Just for me. Courtney, please don't start talking about your academic tech stuff or those privacy theory things. Brandon doesn't have time to listen to that kind of lecture. I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I took a screenshot and sent it to Whitney Ramirez, my closest friend, fellow board member at CyberGuard, and the one person who knew exactly how absurd the situation was. Whitney's reply came almost immediately, accompanied by a string of laughing emojis, LOL. She has no idea Brandon is the guy who sits across the table from you every quarter asking for your input on the exact same academic tech stuff. Just let them discover it naturally. It's going to be priceless. I smiled, the first genuine one I'd felt all week, and typed back, exactly. I'm not planning to say a word. Let the evening unfold. Whitney sent one final message. Wear the black dress. The one that makes you look like you own the room. Because technically, you kind of do. I set the phone down and looked out at the Manhattan skyline from my living room window. The city lights glittered steadily, indifferent to family dramas and unspoken hierarchies. For years, I had chosen silence not out of fear, but out of a quiet certainty that their version of success and mine operated in entirely different universes. Now, though, the universes were about to collide in the same brightly lit living room in Westchester, under the same chandelier, surrounded by the same people who had spent decades deciding whose achievements mattered. I didn't feel anger anymore. What I felt was something calmer, more powerful anticipation. The night was coming. And when it arrived, no one would be able to pretend anymore. The day of the party finally arrived. I drove my Tesla from Manhattan across the George Washington Bridge, heading toward Westchester. The familiar route wound through affluent suburbs where grand houses sat tucked behind ancient oak trees. Kelsey's home stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, a two-story colonial with a wide front lawn manicured to perfection, outdoor lights already glowing warmly against the early evening sky. I parked along the curb and walked up the stone path. The moment I stepped through the front door, the rich aroma of roasted chicken, fresh salad, warm bread, and deep red wine enveloped me. A long dining table dominated the living room, draped in crisp white linen set with fine china crystal glasses and a lush centerpiece of white roses. About 20 guests milled around, mostly Kelsey's colleagues from CyberGuard, a handful of her closest friends, and my parents, Thomas and Patricia, already seated at the head of the table, laughing and chatting animatedly. Kelsey moved through the crowd like the hostess of the year. She wore a deep burgundy cocktail dress, hair swept into an elegant updo, makeup flawless. Champagne flute in hand, she floated from group to group, her laughter bright and frequent, her voice carrying just enough to make sure everyone heard. Brandon will be here any minute. Everyone, he just wrapped a meeting with the European team. So busy he can only stay for a short while. Please keep things polite and professional. Okay? No random questions about work. She turned to my parents with a sweet smile. Mom, Dad, you two stay right at the head of the table. That way Brandon can see what a proper family we have. Then her gaze landed on me. I was standing near the window holding a glass of plain water. She frowned slightly. Courtney, why don't you take that seat in the corner? And remember, no talking about data security theories or research papers. Brandon doesn't have the bandwidth for academic stuff. I gave a small nod, said nothing, and walked to the chair she'd pointed out at the far end of the table. The conversation flowed easily among the guests. Someone asked about CyberGuard's latest project. Kelsey answered with pride, every sentence laced with Brandon's name. Brandon is the one really driving this forward, she said. His leadership was the key to our strong quarter. My mother beamed. Our oldest daughter really knows how to choose the right partner. My father nodded vigorously. Success comes from connections. Kelsey understands that better than anyone. No one asked me anything. Not a single question about my week, my work, or even how the drive had been. I sat quietly watching the performance unfold. Then the doorbell rang. Kelsey let out an excited squeal. He's here. She hurried to the door, guests rising to their feet with polite applause. Brandon stepped inside, charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt open at the collar, no tie, holding a bottle of vintage Bordeaux as a gift. He was 43, tall, polished, carrying the easy confidence of someone accustomed to boardrooms. Kelsey threw her arms around him, kissed his cheek, then spun toward the room. Everyone, this is Brandon Hayes, Senior Executive at CyberGuard Solutions, the man who made my promotion possible last week. Brandon smiled courteously and shook hands with my parents first. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming. His eyes scanned the room and froze the instant they reached me. The smile vanished. His expression shifted from polite warmth to stunned recognition. His mouth parted slightly. Courtney. His voice came out rough, almost disbelieving. I rose slowly, set my water glass on the table, and offered a calm smile. Hello, Brandon. Kelsey laughed brightly, patting his arm. That's just my little sister Courtney. She's from New Jersey, teaches at a university or something. Brandon did not laugh. He looked from Kelsey to me, then back to Kelsey. Courtney Thompson. Is your sister Kelsey? Nodded, still smiling. Yes, of course. Why? He took a slow, deep breath, his tone steady but unmistakable. You're Courtney Thompson, independent member of the board of directors at CyberGuard Solutions, the one who sits in the boardroom with me every quarter, the one who approves the global security strategy and signs off on executive compensation packages. Silence crashed over the room like a wave. The soft background music kept playing, but no one spoke. No one moved. Kelsey's laugh choked off mid-breath. Her hand tightened around her champagne flute. What are you talking about? Courtney is just a lecturer. Brandon shook his head once slowly. No, Courtney is one of the most influential independent directors we have. Last year, she identified and helped us mitigate a major security exposure that our entire technical team had missed. And yes, she is the board member who signs the compensation approvals, including mine. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples spread. Kelsey's face drained of color. Her knuckles turned white around the stem of her glass. My parents stared at each other, mouths open, speechless. Whispers began among the guests, soft at first, then growing. I remained standing, eyes locked on my sister's. She looked back at me as though seeing me for the first time. The room that had felt so warm and celebratory minutes earlier now felt thick with tension, the air heavy and charged, like the slow hiss of a fuse, burning toward detonation. After Brandon's words, the room seemed to freeze for several long seconds. The soft background music continued drifting from the speakers, but the laughter and chatter had vanished. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. I drew in a slow, steady breath, straightened my posture, and began to speak my voice, calm, clear, and completely steady. I looked directly at Brandon first, acknowledging him with a small nod, then turned slowly to face Kelsey and my parents. Yes, I said simply. That's correct. The single word landed like a quiet thunderclap. I let it settle before continuing. I've been an independent director on the CyberGuard board for the past 5 years. I chair the Privacy and Security Governance Committee. Every quarter, I review the company's global risk posture, sign off on major strategic initiatives, and as Brandon mentioned, approve executive compensation, including bonuses, equity grants, and base salary adjustments for the C-suite and senior vice presidents. I paused, letting the reality sink in. No one interrupted. The only sound was the faint clink of someone's glass being set down too hard. I never brought it up at family gatherings because, well, it never seemed to matter. Whenever I tried to share anything about my work, the conversation always shifted back to Kelsey's achievements. So I stopped trying. I built my career quietly on its own terms. I turned fully toward Kelsey now. Her face was ashen, lips slightly parted, the champagne flute trembling in her fingers. You've spent years telling everyone, including me, that success comes from connections, from knowing the right people, from marrying up. You've said it so many times that I think you actually believe your position exists because of your networking skills and your marriage alone. I kept my tone even without accusation, just stating facts. But here's the truth: you've never asked about your mid-level sales support role, became a director-level position within 18 months of dating Brandon. Your promotion to senior director last week. That was reviewed and approved in the last board meeting. I attended the one where I questioned whether the performance metrics justified the jump, but ultimately voted yes, because the overall leadership package was balanced and Brandon's team had delivered strong numbers. Kelsey's eyes widened further. She looked like she might speak, but no sound came out. I continued addressing the room more broadly now. I don't say this to diminish anyone's hard work. Brandon is an exceptional executive. The team he leads is talented, but the board exists to provide independent oversight exactly so that personal relationships don't cloud judgment on promotions, compensation, or strategy. That's why they brought in someone like me, an external expert with no personal ties inside the company. I glanced at my parents. My mother's hands were clasped tightly in her lap. My father stared at the tablecloth as though it might offer an explanation. For years, I said softly, you've celebrated Kelsey's every step while my accomplishments stayed invisible. You threw parties for her associate's degree, her wedding, her house, her raises. I got polite nods for a full-ride scholarship to NYU for honors in my MBA for research that's cited hundreds of times in academic and industry literature. I accepted that. I stopped expecting anything else. I took one step forward. But tonight in this room, the separation ends. You can't pretend anymore that my world doesn't touch yours, because it does. Directly. And it has for a long time. Silence stretched again, thick and uncomfortable. Then Kelsey finally spoke, her voice small and cracking. You could have told me. You could have said something. I met her gaze without flinching. I could have. But would you have believed me? Or would you have laughed it off the way you laughed off everything I ever tried to share? She didn't answer. One of Kelsey's colleagues, a woman I vaguely recognized from board presentations, cleared her throat. Courtney's analysis on the 2024 data exposure incident is still required reading for our new privacy officers, she said quietly. She spotted the vulnerability in the vendor API logs when no one else did. Saved the company millions in potential fines. Another guest nodded slowly. Whispers grew into murmurs of recognition. My mother finally found her voice barely above a whisper. Courtney, why didn't you ever... Because it wouldn't have changed anything, I replied gently. You've always seen what you wanted to see. Tonight you're seeing something else. Brandon shifted his weight, looking between his wife and me. I think we should probably talk more privately, he said. All of us. But the moment had already shifted irreversibly. The celebration Kelsey had orchestrated, the one built on pride, hierarchy, and carefully curated appearances, now lay in pieces on the polished hardwood floor. Guests began to glance at watches, at phones at the door. The energy that had filled the house earlier was gone, replaced by a brittle awkwardness. Kelsey set her glass down with a sharp clink, tears welling but not yet falling. I need a minute, she murmured, and walked quickly toward the hallway leading to the stairs. My father stood up slowly, as if the movement required great effort. Courtney, he said, voice rough. We didn't know. I know you didn't, I answered. That was the point. I remained standing in the same spot, calm, composed, while the room around me slowly unraveled. The truth once spoken could not be unspoken. And for the first time in decades, everyone in that house was finally looking at the same reality. After Brandon and Kelsey slipped out to the backyard for their private conversation, the party limped on in strained silence. Guests began making excuses and leaving earlier than planned, until only a handful of Kelsey's colleagues remained, murmuring in small clusters. I stayed long enough to help my mother quietly clear plates and fold napkins, then drove back to Manhattan under the dark highway lights. In the days that followed, everything unraveled, not with dramatic explosions, but through the slow, methodical fallout that large corporations handle when internal policies are breached. A few days after the party, Brandon forwarded a formal memo to CyberGuard's HR and compliance departments. The tone was professional and restrained a notification of an undeclared family relationship that had not been disclosed during Kelsey's promotion process to senior director. Specifically, Kelsey had signed the standard conflict of interest declaration stating no immediate family members held senior positions within the company. Courtney Thompson, her sister, had been an independent board member for 5 years. While there was no evidence of direct interference, the omission created at least the appearance of potential undue advantage in performance evaluations and promotion decisions. The company followed standard Fortune 500 protocol, a discreet internal review, separate interviews with Kelsey, a thorough audit of promotion documentation, email chains, and meeting notes related to her projects. The conclusion came quickly: no intentional manipulation was found, but there was a clear violation of the code of conduct regarding transparency in personal relationships. The finding was classified as minor, but material. The repercussions were swift and practical. Kelsey was quietly demoted from senior director to a senior manager-level role in the same department. Her base salary remained largely intact to avoid legal challenges, but she lost the substantial annual performance bonus, stock grants, and project leadership authority that came with the higher title. She was also removed from the succession planning list for executive positions for a minimum of 2 years. Within weeks, the internal rumor mill churned. Colleagues who once sought her out for casual coffee now kept interactions strictly professional. The phrase "the wife who bragged about her husband while her sister literally signed his paycheck" circulated in hushed hallway conversations. Kelsey's social capital inside the company evaporated overnight. At home, the marriage began to fracture under the weight. Brandon maintained a visible distance. He started coming home later, often after Kelsey had gone to bed, and for the first week he slept on the couch in the guest room. When they did speak, it was limited to logistics bills, household maintenance, the occasional mention of future plans. Kelsey tried apologies, tears, long explanations about how she never meant to mislead anyone. Brandon's response was measured but cold. "I'm not upset that you didn't tell me about Courtney. I'm upset that I spent years believing your career trajectory was built entirely on merit, and now everyone, including my own team, looks at me like I'm the one who pulled strings for my wife." 2 months later, he suggested a formal separation, the common first step in the U.S. before filing for divorce. Kelsey resisted at first, pleading for counseling, but the arguments escalated. Nights filled with raised voices over finances, who would keep the Westchester house, and Kelsey's habit of oversharing professional triumphs with friends and family. The foundation of their relationship, Brandon's rising status and Kelsey's reflected glow, had cracked irreparably. For my parents, the shift was quieter but no less devastating. The daughter they had always held up as their greatest pride was no longer the shining example they could brag about at neighborhood barbecues or family reunions. Thomas called me a few times, his voice heavy and hesitant. "I never imagined things would turn out this way." Patricia sent long text messages. "Mom is sorry we didn't listen to you more." Yet their behavior remained unchanged. They still rallied around Kelsey, defending her with variations of, "She's going through a really hard time right now. You should forgive your sister." They continued to prioritize her needs, offering emotional and occasional financial support as her income dropped. The joy they once derived from Kelsey's success dried up. No more large gatherings at the Westchester house. No more proud updates to relatives about promotions or new cars. Their modest home in New Jersey grew noticeably quieter. Thomas ventured out less, spending more time in his recliner watching television. Patricia cried alone in the kitchen some afternoons. When they reached out to me, the conversations always circled back to Kelsey's struggles, laced with gentle pressure to reconcile. Kelsey herself began to unravel socially and emotionally. Old friends from the company drifted away. The people who once flattered her for access to Brandon now avoided eye contact in the hallways. She posted vague, reflective updates on her private Facebook. Sometimes success isn't everything. Family is what really matters, but the subtext was obvious to anyone who knew the story. She lost weight, slept poorly, and started leaning heavily on our parents for money to cover the lifestyle gap left by the missing bonus. The confident, outgoing woman who had always commanded attention now carried a visible air of insecurity. She sent me occasional messages accusatory and raw. "Did you do this on purpose? Did you want to ruin everything for me?" I never replied. I stayed completely out of the company's investigation process. I recused myself from any related discussions, maintaining the same firewall I always had. Professional matters remained professional. Family matters remained separate. Yet the consequences unfolded organically like a chain of dominoes, tipped by Brandon's single stunned question in the living room that night. As the pieces continued to fall, one truth became undeniable. The family that had spent decades constructing a hierarchy of worth could no longer control the outcome. As the full weight of the fallout settled in Kelsey's demotion, Brandon's growing detachment, the whispers echoing through the company corridors, my family refused to let go. What began as stunned silence evolved into persistent outreach, shifting from quiet regret to desperate pleading, and eventually to subtle, then overt pressure. Over the following weeks, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls, texts flooded in, and finally came the in-person confrontations I could no longer entirely avoid. Kelsey initiated the campaign. For the first week after her title change was announced internally, she called every evening. Her voice trembled on the line, teetering on the edge of tears. "Courtney, I'm so sorry. I had no idea how important you really are at the company. I thought you were just a regular professor. I was wrong. I never really listened to you. Please forgive me. I'm struggling so much right now." I listened quietly each time, offering only brief responses. "You need time to process this." After several calls, the tone shifted to pleading for intervention. "Brandon is talking about separation. I don't know what to do. Can you just say a few words to him? You're on the board. He respects you. He'll listen." I answered the same way every time work and family are separate. I don't get involved. My parents soon joined in. One Saturday afternoon, Thomas and Patricia drove up from New Jersey and appeared unannounced at my Manhattan apartment building. Patricia's eyes were red-rimmed as she pressed the intercom. "Courtney, please open the door, sweetheart. We're family. Mom knows she was wrong. We favored your sister too much. But Kelsey is falling apart. You can't abandon her." Thomas's voice followed low and weary. "Dad's getting old, honey. Don't let the family break over this. You've done so well, we're proud of you. But you have to help your sister get back on her feet." I buzzed them up. They sat on the living room couch while I remained standing. They poured out apologies, explanations, and requests. I heard them out without committing to anything. As they left, Patricia pulled me into a tight hug and whispered, "You're the best daughter we could have. Please don't cut us off." When gentle appeals failed, the messages took on a sharper edge. Kelsey began sending long texts that mixed remorse with accusation. "Did you do this on purpose? Did you want to humiliate me in front of everyone at work? You knew you had more power than Brandon. Why didn't you say something sooner so I wouldn't look like a fool? I thought you were humble. Turns out you were just waiting for the right moment to get back at me." Another message arrived days later. "You're so well-off apartment in Manhattan, everything. Can't you at least help me financially a little? I'm struggling without the bonus." After the 10th message in that vein, I blocked her number. My mother tried from a different phone. "You're not answering Kelsey anymore. She cries all day. You've succeeded. Why are you being so cold?" Family means forgiveness. Thomas sent an email. "Dad doesn't want to watch his oldest daughter collapse. Could you please speak to Brandon? Just one word. You're on the board." I left them unanswered. When direct pleas produced no results, Kelsey turned public. She posted on her private Facebook, visible to mutual friends, relatives, and many colleagues. Today I realized success isn't everything. Some blood relatives turn their backs when you're down. I used to be so proud of my little sister, but now I'm just sad. Sometimes money and status change people. The post quickly gathered supportive comments. "We're here for you. Kelsey family should stick together." "Sorry, you're going through this? That's so disappointing." Several mutual acquaintances texted me privately, "What's going on? Courtney Kelsey's post is really heavy. What happened?" She followed with Instagram stories, old family photos with me, cropped out of the frame, captioned simply, "When the people who should have your back disappear." My parents avoided public posts, but they began calling relatives and old neighbors, framing the story in their own way. "Courtney's made it big now and doesn't care about the family anymore. She's cut off all contact." Throughout every phase, I maintained complete silence. I didn't reply to messages, didn't agree to meet, didn't return calls. After enough attempts, I blocked the remaining numbers. I refused to engage on social media, explain myself to mutual contacts, or defend against the narrative being spun. Explaining would only feed the cycle. Silence let it burn out on its own. Instead, I turned back to the life I had built. I met Whitney for coffee to review the upcoming board agenda prepared for a privacy conference panel, and walked along Riverside Park on weekend mornings. The external pressure washed over me without penetrating. I had learned long ago that their version of family required me to shrink to rescue, to stay in the background. I was no longer willing to play that role. The pleas and pressure stretched across several months, growing more frantic and desperate with each failed attempt. They never truly changed. They still wanted me to step back into the familiar position of the quiet, helpful younger sister who could fix everything for Kelsey and preserve the family image. When it became clear I would not budge, the messages slowed, then stopped. But that final silence was not acceptance. It was the sound of a fracture that had grown too wide to repair. About a year has passed since the promotion party in Westchester. Everything has quieted down. No more messages, no more calls, no lingering social media posts. My family has gone completely silent, and so have I. I no longer look back, no longer wait for the sincere apology that might never come. My life now consists only of what I have built for myself, and it is more beautiful than I ever imagined it could be. I still live in my 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, the one with the wide balcony overlooking the Hudson River. Every evening, I sit out there with a cup of coffee, watching the city lights reflect on the water. The view never gets old. It reminds me that the world is vast and my place in it is mine alone. My routine is steady and fulfilling: mornings, teaching graduate seminars at NYU, Stern quarterly board meetings at CyberGuard, plus 3 other Fortune 500 companies, where I serve as an independent director. This year, I was invited to deliver the keynote address at the largest cybersecurity conference in Las Vegas, a platform earned entirely through my published work, speaking record and reputation in the field. No family member was there to witness it, and I didn't need them to be. Financially, everything remains secure. My annual income holds steady at around $3 million, allowing continued investments in broad market index funds and a few carefully chosen real estate properties. I travel more freely now, a week hiking in Iceland during the summer midnight sun, a short autumn trip to Tokyo to wander quiet temples and taste seasonal kaiseki. These moments are mine, no explanations owed, no expectations to meet. My closest relationships are genuine and reciprocal. Whitney Ramirez remains my most trusted confidant. We meet for dinners in the city, discuss upcoming board strategies, or simply laugh about everyday absurdities. I've also grown closer to a small circle of colleagues and friends who value me for who I am, not for what I can provide or how I compare to someone else. Loneliness no longer feels like a threat. I've learned to enjoy my own company deeply. I no longer return to New Jersey for holidays. Last Christmas, I spent the day alone in my apartment with a good book, a bottle of vintage Bordeaux, and the soft glow of the tree lights I put up for myself. I felt no emptiness, no guilt. I send no gifts, make no calls, attend no weddings or funerals. I chose full no contact, a boundary many people in the US now set when family dynamics become chronically toxic. It wasn't a decision born of anger, it was born of self-preservation. Meanwhile, the final consequences continued to unfold for the others. Kelsey and Brandon's divorce was finalized 8 months after the separation began. The court divided their assets fairly. Kelsey received a portion of their joint savings, but Brandon bought out her share of the Westchester house so he could keep it. Kelsey moved back in with our parents in New Jersey. The modest house that once felt spacious now seems cramped with 3 adults under one roof. She found a lower-level position at a smaller regional firm enough to cover basic living expenses, but no bonuses, no leadership responsibilities, no visible path upward. She rarely posts on social media anymore. The endless stream of proud updates has dried up. The last message she ever sent me read, "I regret everything now. But it's probably too late." I didn't respond, and that was the end of our contact. My parents have aged noticeably in the last year. Thomas's high blood pressure has worsened. He spends most days indoors, rarely venturing beyond the driveway. Patricia still calls distant relatives, retelling old stories, but the audience has dwindled. No one wants to hear about our successful oldest daughter anymore. They tried one final group email to an old address I no longer check. The house in New Jersey is quieter than ever. They live with a silent regret for the favoritism that blinded them, for overlooking the daughter who quietly achieved more than they ever acknowledged, and for losing her permanently because they couldn't see her until it was too late. This story is not about revenge. It is about refusing to shrink yourself so others can feel comfortable. Real success is not measured by family approval. It is measured by the life you create, without needing their permission or their praise. If your family has ever dismissed you, favored a sibling, ignored your efforts despite everything you've given, know that you have the right to walk away. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't require you to keep proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. Don't wait for the perfect apology. Sometimes it never arrives. Don't wait for them to change. Change has to come from within them, not from your endurance. Surround yourself with real friends, meaningful work, and inner calm. The strongest silence is not the silence of suffering. It is the silence of someone who has chosen to leave and never look back. And when you do, you'll realize something profound. You didn't lose your family. You found yourself. I turn off the lights in my apartment and step onto the balcony one last time. The city sparkles below, endless and indifferent. My phone remains silent. No notifications, no missed calls. Just the soft sound of the river and the steady rhythm of a heart that is finally free.